on the platforms. So I think maybe if you guys have an opportunity, we could potentially recap some of the things that we've discussed currently. And yeah, we're live currently. So, if there's any opportunity to recap kind of what we've discussed, a lot to be appreciative of for Coach Rogers and all the effort and attention to detail that he provided throughout his years. And, we're gonna sound like a broken record because we already talked about this for our closed recording. But 20 years of commitment and service to the Jacks. Obviously, we're grateful for what he's been able to do. We understand the range of emotions the fan base is felt, but at the same time, I don't think you flush 20 years of dedication to blue and yellow overnight. And I think the approach is to set your sights on the future and what we've got in terms of momentum moving forward. And there's a lot to be excited about. And we kind of recapped the season here, but just to kind of put it in a nutshell, we left a lot on the table in the games that were on the slate. And in about 3 of them, I think unforced errors personally, as far as, letting the little things go by the wayside and just not being as crisp as we needed to in the bigger moments, I think got the best of us. Obviously, we talked about losing a ton of production, right? Mm-hmm. Give or take 40% from the offensive side of the ball with the Yankees. Obviously, we talked about it. Graham Goring and Griffin Wilde were like 3 and 4 receivers in that unit. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they're very green and stepping into bigger shoes this year, bigger roles. And then you look at kind of trying to find our identity with a new offensive coordinator, just kind of slowly plugging along. And we found our stride at a certain point. And, guys stepped up, arguably one of the most athletic players in the FCS, specifically at the quarterback position, Chase Mason. He's announced he's burning the ships. He's all in. So a lot to look forward to on the horizon here. And I definitely do. They don't pay me for this, thank God. But yeah, we're happy to be live now. We understand the displeasure for the decision that Coach Rogers made, but obviously he is changing the lives of his entire staff, right? We mentioned that, gentlemen, and every man has to go his own way, but when you have an opportunity to change the futures and the family situations for guys that have been in the trenches with you, you're going to make that decision. And I think in terms of personality, we have a lot to be optimistic about. When you look at the night and day contrast between Coach Jackson, very charismatic. Stack, you should definitely get into some insights you have having played under his guidance. But a guy who's super accessible and attainable. The fan base is just going to be really eager to see what he does, I'm sure, but they're going to understand that he's a connector, he's a builder of young men, and he's done it at every stop. So I think a lot to be encouraged by. And Stack, if you just want to highlight some of the experience you've got with him as a recruiter for the Jacks and a coach.
I'd say Coach Jackson, like I talked about before, like, bro, he could fit in with almost anybody, right? Like, being a huge Omaha guy, and then at the same time, being a white guy in South Dakota, coaching a room full of black dudes from Chicago or Arizona or whatever, and never really being out of place or being uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying? Like, we all know, like, we've been around, like, certain white people that like kind of are like a little bit awkward when you're dealing with brothers. You know what I'm saying? Where they're like, oh, I don't know if I can say this, can't say that. Like, I've never seen Coach Jackson like in a spot where he's uncomfortable in terms of recruiting. I think he's one of the best recruiters I have ever been around. Like, he's gotten some of the, like we said, some of the baddest dudes to ever step on this campus, like your Cade Johnsons and your like Ryan Eretz and like all those Omaha guys, that Omaha pipeline that we had for a really long time that helped the Jacks out for, the better part of like what seemed like a decade, right? Like coming up into like this run that we've kind of had. And I feel like, in terms of like personable, like one of the most personable guys you'll ever meet. I think, in terms of being able to push the university forward and, kind of having those conversations with like donors and trying to get stuff in the collective, like, and all this, I think that he's better suited for that than someone like, Coach Rogers. And that's not a shot at Coach Rogers at all. Like, if it was all about being a head coach, was all about X's and O's, like, Coach Rogers would be the best head coach of all time, right? And and I was just gonna say, you got to acknowledge that there are things that certain people excel at that others don't. And I feel like there are plenty of things that Coach Jackson can really excel at and push the entire university forward on.
Well put. And I think at the end of the day, you can be the best at scheme all you want, but it's about the Johnnies and Joes and not the X's and O's when push comes to shove, especially, at the FCS level where you're kind of that fringe G5. And it's going to be interesting to see how he assembles that. But as was mentioned here in the chat, like who he assembles around him, I think the fan base should be very, very encouraged by. A lot of familiarity with the institution at South Dakota State, from what I'm hearing, and the different position units are going to be well off in the end. Tight ends looking good. Offensively, I like what I'm hearing. Defensively, there's a lot to be encouraged by as well. So I'll leave that up to Coach Jackson to be able to announce that. I think that's his right and privilege as well as the administration's, and I don't want to announce prematurely or speculate and kind of jump the gun on that stuff. But a lot to be excited about, and we need to focus forward, right? Like we're saying, I think when it comes to Coach Rogers on this final point, if this was the thing that kind of invigorated the fan base and got them to open their eyes to the reality of NIL and the nature of college football right now, I think that's a net positive. When you create a sense of urgency around the NIL and the collective that was just launched today, Jacked NIL, for those who are curious, check it out on X, and I'm sure there's going to be more information unveiled. There's links all over there. Check it out. But a lot to be excited about when it comes to financially backing the Jacks so that we understand the ante needs to be upped, right? This is a new nature of college football, and I think there needs to be no hesitancy to understand if you want to compete at the highest level within this subdivision. I mean, we need to do things a little differently and adapt with the times. And Coach Stig said, like Scott mentioned on the Happy Hour podcast with John Haskins, it was a phenomenal interview. He shared a lot of insight. When Coach Stig, who's incredible at understanding when to adapt, what his own blind spots were, important for the collective university and those that support it to understand that same thing. Whether you like it or not, this is the new nature of college football until things change. And with that being said, we know what we need to do, and we know where we need to go to really up the ante. So,
yeah, like kind of mentioned before, it's okay to be excited about it right now because we as a fan base need to just move on. And why not use this excitement that we should have? Because we all know how great of a coach and recruiter Dan Jackson is. Use that as a springboard. That's one of those cliche terms that we've rattled off a couple times now tonight. Let's really boost ourselves into the stratosphere here and use this momentary setback as a way to really propel forward into the future. Like, be excited instead of disappointed. Now we're done grieving. It's like we lost our great aunt or something. Now let's get excited. It's time to move forward, and what better time than going into the off season and really give our program a boost.
Yeah, and I'd like to ask you guys a question. I asked it before in the closed recording, but I think it's worth reiterating. Was there any better offensive lineman pair than Mason McCormick and Garrett Greenfield to play at South Dakota State, Stack?
Absolutely not. Not that I've seen.
And with that being said, where did they improve their own draft stock?
Right there in Brookings, South Dakota. You're going to get me on a rant again.
That's right. Tucker Craft?
Yeah, like,
Tucker,
bro.
Yeah.
Right. If you're a dude, like, it'd be different. Like, if you feel like maybe you're a fringe guy and, like, maybe I got to prove it, in the Big Ten or else they're not going to take me seriously. Bro, I don't even know if that's a thing. Like, being, like, honest. Like, I mean, I'm not some, like, expert on it. Like, maybe we could talk to Mason about it one day, but I feel like, if you just dominate your competition where you're at and like it's undeniable that this guy needs to play more football, like you're putting on an NFL helmet, you're going to get your shot. You know what I'm saying? So to a certain degree, like, yeah, I feel like it is about money to a certain extent. Right. And I feel like, is that always a bad thing? No. You know what I'm saying? Because if you're playing college football now, right, and let's say you're at South Dakota State and your buddy's at I don't know, some school that's way worse than us. And then you see him getting paid, and I know like they probably talk about it with their homies, like, yeah, bro, like I'm getting this a month, like I'm chilling, right? And like that could make you feel some kind of way, right? And I feel like as a university, I think it's a good thing that we're getting into this now. Do I think that it should have taken this long or taken this much dramatics? No, but then again, like I'm not in the back rooms, like, and I'm not the one throwing the money down. I'm not the one writing the checks, so I'm not.
I think you made a really great point in previous pods, though. Like the portal, yes, it can be used to supplement. It can be used to give guys a leg up, or guys who play with a chip on their shoulder. Maybe they think they've been overlooked. But the reality is for guys like your Tucker Crafts, your Mark Gronowski's, your Wildies, guys that maybe were, completely overshot in their skill assessment and developed into something that was unforeseen completely, right? It's not necessarily for those guys when they get really serious about their production, or they review their own film and they see, okay, well, maybe I'm a tweener guy and I don't have a ton of production at the FCS level, but I'm an option at the FBS level. Is that something that you want to be? Do you want to be an option when you were South Dakota State's priority? I mean, that's something to really weigh and measure.
And another thing I want to say is, like, bro, at South Dakota State, like, we all know you can play there. Like, that's not the thing, right? Like, and that's one thing I want to get across at all, right? Like, if you're playing at South Dakota State, like, bro, it doesn't surprise me that you're like, dude, I could play at Minnesota. Like, yeah, probably. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not about that. It's, am I going to go to Minnesota and be the man? Right? Because, like, I know you're not trying to leave and go play somewhere else and just be like, all right, like, just to get a flick up on Instagram.
When you're a 40 reps a game guy at South Dakota State, to transfer and to be an 8-rep guy, for you to spell someone on third down, for you to be a special team savant, but maybe not get your run at your position group, those are things you really have to weigh. When it gets down to brass tacks, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and be okay with your decision. I support that. And then it should be worth mentioning, we don't know everyone's financial situation, right? When they're throwing 6 figures at you, I'd be remiss to be the type of person to say, hey, you got to turn that down. Like, that's not what I'm saying. Right. What I'm saying is you got to shake hands with who you are and accurately assess who you are and what you're capable of doing. So that way, when you look at, what offers are on the table versus what you've done and who you surrounded yourself with in your circle, is that worth, moving on from? So that's all I'm saying when it comes to that. I do want to get into Dan's travels. So Coach Jackson, as a player, he was a linebacker at South Dakota State in the early 2000s. As I mentioned previously, when you look at tracking guys from that era, is kind of tough to follow, right? There was not a huge media presence. I believe Terry Vanderbeck and our SID were the only real ones kind of following along in boosting the signal there. But now that's kind of why we've set up this endeavor to boost the signal in Jackrabbit Athletics. Matt Zimmer's done a phenomenal job, and he's actually accurately announcing certain things that are breaking. And I'll just leave that at that. JI does a great job as well. They've really done a number on coverage, especially from a recruiting standpoint. So now those resources are there. And when you look at, again, tracing the lineage, you couldn't really find much on Dan as a player. But what he's been able to do, he's a true connector. He is charismatic, like I mentioned, and he's a builder and a visionary. Those are Stig's words, right? He was curious, and I love what Coach Stig said again on John Gaston's podcast, where he said he encouraged coaches to daydream, not to just, wander off into oblivion of your mind, but to daydream about what are the things that we're doing that we could do better, what are the things we're not doing, and what are the things we need to do to make South Dakota State a completely different program than what it is today. And Dan is tailor-made for that. Not only is he an ace recruiter, but he's going to open up doors that maybe, like you guys said, that we didn't have open before due to his sheer personality. And then the road that he's traveled. He spends 8 years at South Dakota State wearing every hat in the book. And it's worth noting, who was the associate head coach when he was at South Dakota State? It was him. Wasn't anybody else that was tabbed for potential promotions down the line, guys that we've had in our very recent past. So that's something to be encouraged by, because Stig even identified that. And like Scott mentioned in our closed recording session that we had, Coach Jackson was the first person that came to most people's minds because of who he is, because of the recruiting connections, because of his familiarity with the program, and the fact that he wanted it, knowing all the blemishes and the shine that we had on our program, right? So then you fast track, just to get into his lineage here. You fast track, he goes to Northern Illinois, linebackers coach. They go from worst to first in the MAC. They win the conference, right? He's a part of that. Then he gets tabbed as DC. Then he goes to the SEC. Why wouldn't you, right? Gets that opportunity to continue to sharpen his tools and get some more connections. And obviously he followed Coach Lee, who had a Jackrabbit tie, right? And, then he gets an opportunity at Idaho, back in the FCS. D coordinator is about to follow Eck to New Mexico, and then he was frothed in at the mouth to get this opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It's like beautiful, right? It couldn't have laid itself out any better at a time when South Dakota State really needed someone to step into the spotlight and say, hey, I'm about it.
Yeah, and I was gonna say the way he kind of operated, like when I was still in school, like when I was playing at SDSU, I think it's funny that because he was always like the cool parent when Coach Rogers was always like the angry parent. And I think that's funny that they're switching off head coaching positions like that. And I also want to shout out Cody, who said I think he's like Poffenberg is a cautionary tale for the transfer portal. Because, bro, they will pay you 6 figures for you to sit on the bench, bro.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a lot of dudes know that. A lot of guys don't realize that. They will pay you to sit and watch, bro. Yeah. So if it's about, I want to show up and, wow, this is a cool experience to look at this crowd and be a part of this program and lift with these guys, or am I going to be a difference maker? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Because they'll pay you $100,000 to come sit and watch them practice.
Mm-hmm. Tommy Schuster's another
Michigan State, right? Isn't that where he ended up?
Yeah, didn't sniff the field. So, I mean, I don't fault these guys for trying their hand at the next level. You do need to have an appropriate estimation of your stock, right?
Exactly.
And that's all I'm getting at. And I told you guys before, I want these younger guys who maybe their whole MO is to play football in college. Maybe they don't know the full history of the lineage that came before them, from the Danny Battens, who could have transferred to Arizona back home, who didn't, and ended up getting drafted in the league. Buck Buchanan, finalist, all that type of stuff. Adam Bach, there were some very high-profile schools that completely overlooked him and were highly suiting him late, and he was like, nah, I'm home. Now
Iowa wanted him right away after they played him.
Exactly. Now that's your DNA.
The play he made.
Yeah, that's your DNA, guys. That's your lineage. Those are the guys who've walked a mile in your shoes. So that's something to consider when you look at that. And as you see these dominoes falling, we're starting to see you got your Hagan, your Q, Chase Mason, obviously, the field general. He's got to be out there leading the front. Mm-hmm. And, Van Toll, you got Kirschman, you got Ullman. Yep. You got all these guys. These dominoes are falling. Even the younger recruits that haven't even made their presence known necessarily in blue and yellow yet. So a lot to be encouraged by, man. That's the thing. I understand the fan base feeling all the feels, but like Stack said, we're not. Now's not the time to be the bitter X. Now's the time to go upgrade, right? And I think that's what we're doing. So, gentlemen, we've kind of, traced out our past, our present, and where we are currently. I think that Tanner makes a good point. Griffin testing the waters early after 2 years. I think it's to be expected. His production was understandable, and just because you enter the portal doesn't mean you dip, right? Mm-hmm. It was a no-brainer seeing staff turnover that all these guys would enter the portal. Why wouldn't you test the waters, then wait to see who the next staff will be, and then you get to know them, ingratiate yourself with them, and if it's not meant to be, then you do what you got to do for you and yours. So I'm not really shocked on all this, especially when you flip on the tape. Again, it goes back to what Stack said. Mm-hmm. Know your production.
Yeah, he's a guy that we not like, bro. Nobody here is mad about that. I'm not hating on him at all. And you look at for example, you look at the Yankee twins, right? The opportunity they got. That's a couple white wide receivers that went here and had their cup of coffee in the league, it seems, right? And it's well, he might be thinking well, maybe if I go play somewhere bigger, my opportunity will be, that much bigger. For him, I'm not mad at you. I want him to know that, gang. I'm not mad at you for that. Like, you know, and he put in his time here, and you know, he's a guy that could have been a number one receiver as a freshman. You know what I'm saying? He had to play behind some guys. And now to have the production that he did the past few years, like, you know, I'm not hating on him for going anywhere. The soapbox talks that we have are for guys that are not
right. Exactly.
and that's not an insult to anyone. I'm saying, like, if you're not like that caliber of guy where you're like, I am a dude, and these people, they're not going to pay me this money for me to just like show up and like, yeah, maybe you'll rotate and maybe you'll just help us out a bit. Like, you need to be a dude.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pat Whitty makes a phenomenal point here. Scott, you want to take it?
Well, the whole Sluka thing. Where was that? UNLV, when it was just an issue with what the lawyer didn't cross his T's and dot his I's, and all of a sudden,
I didn't mean the specifics, but basically he just didn't get paid. Started 3 games. UNLV was 3-0,
and they were balling. Yeah,
and due to the complex nature of NIL and the fact that it's heavily unregulated. You can find yourself left out in the cold, both financially and without a team. And now, what is his, what's the impression left on coaches and other institutions? And now he's got to, fight the legal battles, I'm sure, to retain eligibility and do all that. And, or maybe he didn't because he didn't void his eligibility since he only played 3 games. But regardless, do you want that headache as a role player, as guys who are trying to, it's all choose your heart, right? Like, what are you willing to accept and what are you willing to take from a financial standpoint? And what are you willing to, I hate the phrase leave your legacy, but essentially you are building some sort of legacy for yourself, not necessarily for the fan base. Dude, guys forget greats who played when I played, and I'm not even that old, right? Like, it's not about that. It's about making a proper estimation, like Stack said. And we beat that horse to death, but we just want to keep it real with you guys as you're making these decisions and you're getting down to brass tacks, because time is of the essence here, and you should be told the truth, I think. And
and if you're an all conference guy, I think that's when you start thinking about those decisions. I'd say, like, if you want just like a feasible, like, well, when should I know I'm a guy? Like, the rest of the conference is saying, like, yeah, this is one of the best dudes in our conference. Like, that's when you consider that. And that's not to say, like, oh, I'm all conference, I should leave. No, I'm saying that,
like you said, man, Spencer Brown, Trevor Penning, there's dudes all throughout the Missouri Valley that have improved their stock right where they're at. And that's just, do what you will with that information. No harm, no foul either way. But as we look forward to what's to come, I believe we touched on it in our closed session, but now would be a great time to rehash it. A lot of excitement around it. There's guys who are very familiar and very acquainted with Jackrabbit Athletics that I'm hearing. Again, I will wait for Dan, Coach Jackson, and team to announce. But a lot to be encouraged by. I think some real excitement, some very anchored in recruiting spots that are native to South Dakota. That would be really a treat to continue to retain. You got to win your state first and foremost, wherever you are. And I'm encouraged by that. I'm encouraged by the schedule next year. I don't think this is the time anyone should be thinking, oh, the Jacks take a step back. I think the MVFC is still the cream of the crop. And I think we're 1A or 1B in that crop, right? Every other school has had to go through this, and now it's just our time where we're ripping off the Band-Aid. Sense of urgency is created around NIL. The dudes are back. They're burning the ships, and we've got some juice coming in to man the ship. So I think when you look at the schedule moving forward, we got some exciting games, right? We got don't believe we have an FBS game scheduled this year, but we have Montana State at Montana State. That's going to be a great one. Obviously, we got a tough Valley slate as always, but there's going to be some games in there that we can flex our might and really run it up and see what we've got.
One really good thing is that we do not have a Division II team on the schedule.
Thank God.
Which, sorry, Augustana would beat Mercyhurst by a lot, but they have a 2 next to that little D, Division II, that really hurts us as far as the schedule goes, especially when it comes playoff time. And we all know how well that went, during the selection show or leading up to that selection show. Add another D1 win if it's no disrespect to Mercyhurst, they're at the level that they need to be Division I. Not the strongest, but it's still a Division I win, and that is absolutely what we need.
Right. And so for those who aren't fully tuned into what Scott's saying, obviously D2 teams, whether they're wins or not, are non-counters towards the FCS playoff selection. So that dinged us a little bit this last year. Obviously, we understand the importance of home field advantage and wanting to put people in the elements late into December. And I like our odds moving forward with what we've got shaping up. When you also look at a big factor in this entire picture, gentlemen, we should definitely give a nod to Justin Sell, our athletic director.
Mm-hmm.
The dude is obviously unwavered by adversity. He raises funds like no other. When you talk about, being a crucial aspect in getting the facilities up to par, Coach Stig also said this on John Haskins' Happy Hour show. Some of the best facilities in the nation. Forget FCS. I mean, obviously, when you look at stadiums, obviously the capacity is different, but it's beautiful. Club 71, obviously what Dana Dykhouse has been able to do with Sanford, the big buy-in from Sanford from athletics in rehab standpoint. You look at the SJAC, it's phenomenal, man. You look at, there's Brian said it. There's few places as special as SDSU. He's been to other places. It's not always, grass is greener on the other side, right? And I think when you look at facilities, that's particularly the case. There's few that rival it, and that's something to take into account. That was the doing of President Sheik when obviously now President Dunn, and then you got Justin Sell, who obviously had to make some calls and pull the trigger on this new staff. So just shout out to him. He's been there since 2009. I remember him being hired from UNI. Sorry, Panthers. From UNI in 2009, and all he's done is continue to up the level across athletics, but particularly be a huge backer of football. Obviously continuing to be creative in ways that he can move the needle for us, and he's done that, I think, with Coach Jackson in this hiring and having that faith and that foresight to know, hey, we went from one personality. This is a complete contrast, and that's not taking anything away from guys that came before. It's just the nature of moving forward and having to do what we need to do to upgrade, because, just like players having to upgrade from week to week, we need to upgrade from staff to staff. And I think that's been done here.
Yeah, I'm excited to see, especially, I'd say, I don't think any of us would be, I'm trying to put an elegant way of saying this, something different offensively. I'd say last year probably isn't the best that we've seen like in the past few years, and I'm excited to see what the new coach will be, offensive coordinator will be, excited for, especially seeing, the athlete that Chase is, the creative ways you can get him involved in our offense, and the creative ways you get like 3 tight ends involved in our offense. You know what I'm saying? Like I think Kyle was saying earlier, like, where are those like trio sets, man? Like, get all 3 of these dudes out here on the field at the same time and like see what they can do. You know what I'm saying? The catch radius, all these cats, like, let's make some linebackers really have to cover some dudes that are bigger than them.
Yep.
You know,
and well, I will just say this, Stack. That's a phenomenal point. And here's a nice little teaser. You will see quite a bit of creativity in the offense coming up. Someone who's not shy to do that. So I'm confident in that.
Yeah, man, I'm hyped about it. I'm just waiting till I can hear about it so we can just start speculating the day after.
And I think some very recent fans of Jackrabbit Athletics might be pleasantly surprised who we land on D too. We'll have to stay tuned, but I'm hearing good things. I'm hearing good things from a recruiting perspective, from a likability standpoint. So stay tuned. I know Coach Jackson's got some cards up his sleeve. So we'll see. Sorry for the confusion on going live. Again, it was an oversight, but I think we pretty much covered the gamut for what you guys can expect, from this new staff. Again, want to give flowers to Jimmy for what he was able to do. I'm quite biased having played with him, but, I don't think you flush history for one decision. I know he didn't make the decision lightly if you listen to Coach Stig, and I think that he's doing so on several fronts to better the lives of his staff that he's bringing with, which not a lot of guys get to do. Scott, you mentioned it, like it's no guarantee that they're going to be carryovers on any other staff. So him doing that, I think, showed foresight and discernment to be able to do it the right way for a very tough decision that he was making. And then, you guys can think what you want about the portal and what he might do or not do with some of our current players, but that's a two-way street.
It is.
We mentioned it in the closed session. We have an opportunity to go into the portal to supplement. All right. And I like our odds with the ace recruiter that we've got leading the helm. And at the end of the day, just to put an end cap on this point, schemes are great, but if you don't have the Johnnies and Joes, the X's and O's don't matter. Right. So,
Exactly.
With that, I want to shout out our sponsors one more time, gentlemen, unless we've got anything else. No? All right. So shout out to the Wild Hair of Brookings, South Dakota. We appreciate you back in the pod this year in our endeavors through Splitting Hairs Media and the Splitting Hairs podcast. They run nightly specials, so make sure you check those out. Great options. Fridays always got some good options, and that's today. They're always running the Jacks games, whether it's football, men's and women's basketball, you name it. They've got them up on the screens. Playing hoops is electric. I think they just notched it up yesterday. So check that out. Women are doing pretty well as well. That's probably not surprising to anybody, but that's a great environment to be able to catch a game and make sure you stay responsibly wild. Want to shout out Udemark Insurance. They're doing their due diligence to help demystify the health insurance landscape. They've got products that work with Medicare, so make sure you check them out. Get with one of their agents and clean up the process so that way they can help clean up your health situation. Want to also shout out the OGs, Cottonwood Coffee of Brookings, South Dakota. Love Jacob and all he does for Jackrabbit Faithful. He is a big proponent of what you guys are doing, so make sure you honor him and his support by checking out Cottonwood Coffee on Main. Great place to study. Obviously, you have second semester coming up. Let's start it off on the right foot, get to a quiet place where you can study and stay juiced and energized with a little caffeine fix. You can also check them out at the bistro. They got great fresh eats. Obviously, you got to get your calories right. No better spot to do it there. They've also got their cottonwoodcoffee.com live and active, so you can get your auto drafts. So make sure you check them out. Get what you need to. Subscribe today. And with that, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Looking forward to 2025. Folks, if you like what we do, if you like hearing us bump our gums around all things Jackrabbit football, please like and subscribe and do what you can so we can keep this endeavor going. It's fully self-funded outside of our small number of sponsors. We appreciate you, and let's focus forward. A lot to be excited for. With that, go big, go blue.
Go Jacks.